And for our next talk, we have Ana Lesnovski, who is a professor at Universidad Estadual de Paraná, and she will be giving a talk called Double Game, Artificial Intelligence and Duplicating as a Creative Process. All right, take it away, Ana.
Hi, hello, I'm Ana Lesnovski. I'm a researcher and a professor at Universidade Estadual do Paraná in Curitiba, Brazil. I work within the visual arts undergraduate program and the master's degree in film and audiovisual. I'm also the head of the research group Kinedaria in the Art and Technology Lab, STEAM Lab. My current fields of research are interactive narratives, but today mainly poetics, as in the study of creative processes and how our things come to be. I'm here to talk about a part of that research under the title Double Game, Artificial Intelligence and Self-Duplicating as a Creative Process. Well, let's begin. Seeing oneself as another is absolutely not new to artists. Self-portraiture has been a coherent practice for centuries in paintings, for example. Today, representing oneself is a popular gesture in the form of the selfie, an often ridiculed way of presenting oneself on the internet, albeit a very interesting one, as a way to understand how individuals take control upon their own public image through technical images. In the past, the Renaissance has been a fertile ground for self-portraits, mainly due to the use of rules of perspective, but also as a desire to showcase and practice technical ability. Here we have a self-portrait by Rembrandt, and also a collection of selfies from the hashtag #DuckFaceSelfie on Instagram. One should not ignore, however, the social and political aspects of representing oneself. One very interesting example is the way women have used self-paintings as a way to assert themselves as artists in a very male-dominated field. Here we have Sofosniba Anguissola and Artemisia Gentileschi not only representing themselves, but representing themselves as painters, which is very important in that context. Going forward in time, the matter of making an image and who makes it becomes more complex with the introduction of photography, of course. French photographer Sophie Calle, she turns that act on itself by constantly shifting the act of photographing between herself and others. In La Filature, that's from 1981, she has her mother hire a detective to have her, Sophie, followed around Paris. She later uses those images and the verbal accounts of her actions as seen by the detective to create an exhibit. In a way, Sophie precedes Flusser's argument that the relationship between artist and apparatus is one of a game, where the artist doesn't have full control, and I would say they don't have full knowledge of the machine usually, but nonetheless, the artist pushes it to go further by provoking and illuminating the black box, which is the machine itself and its inner workings. As an artist, working closely with machines both serves to demagicize them, that is to take the magical aspects out of them, and to realize the cultural and semantic threads that traverse them. Virtual worlds, for example, can become a way of living a fantasy, but they often end up replicating ourselves as a double of our lives, one that is neither fictional nor documentary, as Aspen Arcev would put it, but it's rather real, as what happens in Animal Crossing really happens, whether it be a virtual protest against the government, such as we had on my island recently, or a workshop on artificial intelligence. Going a little bit further and closer finally to how this affects my practice, One final example is how artist and software engineer Helena Sarin uses neural networks to create new images, having her own visual work as a database. The results are a series of insights into her creative processes and style, which she often mixes with other sources and references, like Japanese book covers, for example. Um, for Sarin, using herself as the corpus is a way to ensure results that are actually unique in a subjective way. It is because she sees herself in the results, as I understand it, that she's able to recognize a form of subjectivity in the unpredictable images she then obtains and curates, which is a fundamental part of that kind of work. She's in the images, but also removed from them by constantly changing position with the code. For me, coming from a humanities background and working in an all arts campus, working with technology is always a challenge. More so because in education, we tend to explore languages and techniques on a frequent basis. In my practice, I take into account the philosophies of Flusser, Latour, and Simondon, as I consider my role as an experimenter. According to Kathleen Coessens, the artist researcher is perpetually moving between creating and observing as an other. That movement is called to experiment here in relation to experidi, to move oneself towards peril, trouble, mistakes, and the unknown. So my creative process usually begins with lateral experiments as I move towards a subjective desire through technology. Here I began with a series of generators while I considered briefly the role of insights in the semiotic term to associate with that which has never been associated before. And making meaning through textual neural networks. Here's a simple experiment with a nail polish name generator that's curated into 3 columns. The green one are the fine results, the yellow ones are the kind of innovative results, and the red ones are the ones that are closest to nonsense, which happens to be my favorite results for reasons. Then I moved on to a presidency program generator made during the fateful campaign of 2018 in Brazil, which resulted in a lot of texts about deaths and violence, which was a constant issue in presidency programs at that time. It was kind of scary to read. Finally, the desire to generate texts that I could recognize as innovative brings me to start training a neural network on my own academic texts. Pretty soon, a subjective attachment began to develop between us. Sorry, I think oh, there. Sorry, I got lost. So pretty soon we started to develop a subjective attachment, me and the code. I started referring to the network as a she. It certainly helps that Portuguese has no ungendered articles such as it, but I should say that code, software, and program are masculine in Portuguese, while network, machine, and art are feminine. So I chose to call her a she anyway. She then was understood to be something or someone that lived inside my computer. She has read my thoughts. She knows my writing style, yet what she says is new to me. It's always an insight in that sense of new association of ideas. At the end of 2018, I proposed a series of performances where I used to control the network's output by reading my own brain waves with an EEG sensor. The intended feedback loop between my thoughts and my own words, however, was made impossible by my own choice of projecting her words onto me. I couldn't see what she said. I was alone. Besides, performing isn't really my thing. So I tried to move on to an object that was different from my own body in a way. Coming from an experiment with selfies that defy representation, that's an ongoing experiment where I try to break filters and methods of facial recognition. That's something I tend to do as a shy introvert person. I began experimenting with 3D head scans, keeping with the purpose of refusing to obey to the rules of the program while simultaneously offering myself to it. The result is a glitched scan of my face along with the obscuring gesture, my hand over my eye, which is something I tend to do a lot as well. The result is I don't know, the gesture confuses the program, making it duplicate the head, inverted, deformed, with many repeating hands over it. She was now leaving my body, figuratively speaking. That glitched 3D model is then taken to a 3D printer, which produces a whole lot of imperfections due to the imperfect nature of the model itself, which is totally incompatible with proper 3D printing standards. There's a little bit of those experiments. And finally, she was ready to move on to a new body composed of the 3D sculpture, a Raspberry Pi, and a screen. She lived briefly at the top of the highest tower in the city, talking to herself day and night, even when nobody could read it. Everything she thought, so to say, was immediately erased, as well thoughts do. She stayed there until we were forced together again by the quarantine. As Cecilia Salis says about the process of creation, an art object has no point of origin and no end, but is the result of a series of dialogues and internal tendencies with no chronological order. This particular dialogue between myself and my double is also a conversation between an artist researcher and pieces of software and hardware and every person who worked on them, and also the context in which we exist, the texts we read, and the ones we've written. I may have a little bit of time. I'm not timing myself. I wanted to add a little. All right. I want to add something else. I spoke briefly about demagicizing. I'd like to clarify that point a bit. Latour has a great text on that, Bruno Latour. He talks about how when the Portuguese first came in contact with African tribes, and they were so confused because the local people made statues and told them, these are our gods. They couldn't understand it. If they made these, how can they be gods? Of course, the Portuguese ignored totally that they were covered in saints' images, which they wear around their necks, but that's okay. So they used the word fetiche to describe that. It comes from feito, something that has been made. From that comes the word feitiço, or magic spell. In Brazil, there is a derogatory term for rituals made in African-based religions that is called coisa feita, or something that has been made. That echoes Flusser's definition of the difference between ancient magic and current magic. Ancient magic came from gods. Current magic comes from programs, apparatuses that are made by people. So when I say that working with technology takes the magic out of it, I mean that it unveils the making of an object or software. It doesn't replace it. It unveils the making. it doesn't belong to someone else anymore. It belongs to me because I have made it, in part at least. But since we seem as artists to be often at the edge of that relationship, we can always return to that magical state by manipulating the subjectivity around the technical object, which is precisely what happens with this particular work. Since then, me and my double haven't spoken to each other because I kind of respect her privacy right now, and also because she's locked in a box, decontaminated. So that's it. Thank you, and I hope I could present something of my creative processes with artificial intelligence and especially neural networks. Thank you.
Hey Anna, awesome talk. Thank you so much. I'm gonna just mute the slideshow. So I have some questions. Let me go for audience reactions because there are some, and I'm gonna clap too. So I'm wondering, in terms of like, are you collaborating with like software engineers, or are you building this all yourself, or what's your relationship with the technology here?
Yeah, that's something that's very peculiar to our little lab. Since we're in all arts campus, it's kind of hard to develop that kind of relationship. I mean, we do have other universities in the city, but when we do establish partnerships, they're kind of a one-time thing for one project. We can't just move into someone else's lab. So everything we make inside our campus, inside our little lab, it has to, the day-to-day activities have to be done by ourselves, which kind of serves us well, because we do have a sort of philosophy of trying to deal with it in the best way we can. Sure, what we do is very simple. It's not usually very complex, but it helps us making that process of unveiling it better than having someone else do it for us. So it's a mixture between being in a poor institution that doesn't have a lot of resources, but also a choice to do that ourselves. So we tend to sit together in the lab and say, okay, let's explore something. Let's try and see if we can make something out of it, and then works develop from there.
Awesome. No, that sounds like such a cool interdisciplinary lab, and I'm jealous that you're working in that setting. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's really fun. We tend to say that nobody knows anything there, so we're gonna learn it together.
One more question. I'm wondering, like, if you, like, what's like one technical thing that you would like to have, like some like AI that does something that would really be helpful for your art practice? Like, what's your wish list of things that you wish you had and someone would build for you?
We're slowly building our available tools with what we have. I mean, the 3D printer that we use in the lab is mine. I take it there every week and then I take it back home. But something that it's on our horizon, but we haven't